You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and with the NFL Combine now in the rear view mirror, and sights are now set on free agency in about a week or so, and then the draft coming up in a little bit over a month. I'm going to sit down today and talk to you guys about 5 players that I think won this past NFL Combine, so I invite you all to do the same in the comments section down below. Who do you think stood out? Who do you think maybe lost some value here? I'm just talking winners. I don't really like to focus in on people that are quote-unquote losers here. I like to focus on the positives, hence why we're doing this. So we'll start with the very first person that I have on the list here, and to be honest with you, this guy probably won the NFL Combine as a whole, and that's going to be Florida State defensive tackle Braden Fisk. When you look at the numbers here at 6'4", 292 pounds, already an intriguing prospect for a lot of teams looking to add some interior depth here, running a 4.78 40-yard dash, and that obviously not being the most important thing for a D tackle. We're looking at the 10-yard split because we're gauging explosiveness here, but then you look at the 10-yard split going at a 1.68 with a 33.5-inch vertical jump and a broad jump of nearly 10 feet. This is a guy that I think if his stock didn't fly up the boards, I'd be legitimately shocked. Not only were his testing numbers phenomenal, but if you were watching some of the drills that he went through as well, I think out of any defensive lineman that we saw from this past weekend, in terms of fluid movement, the ability to bend, and just the overall explosive effort that he showed, if this guy isn't being taken somewhere within the first round come day one of the NFL draft, I'd be legitimately surprised. But if anyone won the NFL Combine this past weekend, it's got to be Braden Fisk from Florida State. Second player I'm going to look at here, we're going to talk about an offensive tackle here coming out of Washington, and that's going to be Troy Fautanu. At 6'4", 317 pounds, he has a 34.5-inch arm span, hand sitting at 9.5 inches. This felt kind of like a solidification for somebody who is vying to be a legit starting NFL left tackle here, and his numbers actually looked really good overall, with a 40-yard dash sitting at about 5 seconds here, and like we said with defensive linemen, offensive linemen, the dash isn't necessarily the important thing. It's more about the 10-yard split, and his just as impressive as Braden Fisk, as we were talking about, at 0.03 seconds slower with a 1.71. He showed again some good explosiveness out of the legs, 32.5-inch vertical jump, and a 9'5" broad jump for a guy that's 317 pounds. By no means by any stretch of the imagination disappointing, but I will say this, I think that with the solid size and length that he came away with, I think measurements were really important for him, because this day and age, you're looking for big guys to bookend the offensive lines here, especially on the left-hand side, the blind side for a quarterback. At 317, 6'4", you might want him slightly bigger here, but I think the 34.5-inch arms really helped him out, and that was probably one of the bigger things that some people were curious about him, is because he shows a lot of the traits you want to see from a left tackle in the NFL, and I do think that walking away from both his testing and what we saw from him in some of his drills as well, this is a guy who probably solidified himself somewhere within the late first round as a legitimate candidate to be a guy who takes over the left tackle position for some team in the NFL. Third person that we're going to look at here, we're going to flip on over to Texas, a new and incoming SEC team here, and I'm talking wide receiver Xavier Worthy, setting the NFL Combine 40-yard dash record with a massive 4.21 seconds here. His 10-yard split, sub 1.5 at 1.49. He also showed off his explosiveness with the legs with a 41-inch vertical jump and a 10'11" broad jump. I mean, It's surprising, and it's not. Everyone that knows who Xavier Worthy is, he's all about his on-field playing speed and just the explosiveness that he brought to the Texas offense here. But for him to come in now, setting the NFL Combine record in the 40-yard dash is going to fly you up the boards. There have been far less talented wide receivers drafted in the first round just because of that type of explosiveness and speed alone. We don't need to mention names here, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. I will say that something that did come up as a little bit of a surprise here, unless you're somebody who's probably like in the weeds of Texas scouting here coming into the Combine, he was only listed at 5'11", and when you go on a Texas's website, he was listed as 6'1" there. So a little bit smaller than maybe some people were anticipating if they weren't in the know on just how tall he actually was. He also was only at 165 pounds. I saw a tweet from him saying, relax everybody, that is my playing weight. I think Texas has him listed at like 170 or 171, something like that. But, I mean, for a guy that amassed 2,755 receiving yards and 26 total touchdowns during his time in college, this is someone that has the proven production that you want, and on top of that, covets unteachable athleticism at a position that has just become more and more and more valuable as the game has evolved over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Xavier Worthy's probably going to go in the first round. And that's one of those things that, like, if you're a betting guy, you can hammer. It's probably going to be somewhere within the top half of the draft as well. When you think back to someone like John Ross, who got drafted for setting the combine record a few years back himself, Xavier Worthy, in my opinion, is a more complete wide receiver than he is. And he's obviously put up some serious numbers during his time in Texas. If he's not taken within the first round in the top half of the draft, I'd be legitimately surprised. If he drops, he's going to a really good team that's going to be able to maximize his skill set. And I know a lot of people, after seeing his combine, were like, oh my God, Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid, go get him. That would be a phenomenal fit, but there are a handful of teams that I think could really utilize his ability and talent where he could go, and he doesn't necessarily have to be the guy off the rip, but Xavier Worthy, someone whose stock is rising and rising quickly following this past weekend. Next, we'll take a look at Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, cornerback here, and another guy that I definitely think is worth mentioning, someone that places probably had pegged as like a second round selection here, but now has probably a good opportunity to maybe sneak himself into like the very tail end of the first round for a team that's looking for a corner. And a lot of that has to do with some of the combine numbers that he got as far as speed and agility are concerned here. When we look at the 10-yard split and 40-yard dash, 4.33 seconds on the 40, 10-yard split at 1.51. Again, another guy showing some excellent explosiveness combined with really good size at 6 feet and 195 pounds. Of course, the vertical jump, 38 inches, 10'2" broad jump. I mean, you could sit here and talk about all those numbers, and I do think a lot of that helped him. But what really stood out to me, which is a little bit less of the obvious, is going to be the 20 reps on the bench press here. This is something that helps separate you from some of the other guys. And at 6 feet, 195 pounds, you have solid size, but you're not like in the upper echelons of bigger corners. Like, we're seeing some corners come into the league now when you look at guys like Tariq Woolen, who are coming in at like 6'2", 6'3", 200 and some odd pounds here, where they're super fast, super athletic, but also very strong, do really well playing in press coverage. But a guy like his size coming in, putting up 20 on the bench press, 225 for a set of 20, like, come on now. That is a big indicator of his strength and his ability. This is one of those guys that, you know, you could probably feel a lot more comfortable throwing him up in press coverage, being able to jam people at the line of scrimmage with that type of strength here. So keep an eye on Quinion Mitchell. He is potentially going to sneak himself into the first round, in my opinion. If not, he is a very early day two, probably within like the first 10 to 15 picks of the second round at the very latest here. I think he did an excellent job solidifying a spot for himself within that range. And then the final guy that I have highlighted here, and this is someone that a lot of people have already been looking at, but I think him having the combine that he had overall is going to really help solidify what a lot of people thought of him coming into the combine and just heading into draft season this year. And that's going to be defensive tackle from Texas, Byron Murphy. Now, when you look at what he brings to the table, 6 feet and a half inches, 297 pounds, a little bit slighter for a defensive tackle, probably not like your traditional middle of the, this is someone you could probably move around here. And it's in large part because of the athleticism that he showed and put on during the combine here. In my opinion, one of the best movers that we saw from the drills, vicious hands on the bags, very fluid in his movement with some of the drills that he was running as well, showing some good bend and ability to just really get going and move around a lot quicker than some of the other guys. I felt like when I was watching defensive linemen that first day of the combine, that was, and I even tweeted it out too, it's one of the first things that jumped off was just how fluid he moved. Like, combine numbers aside, forget about that stuff. How does a big man like this, nearly 300 pounds, move? And he really impressed me there. So with a really good 10-yard split at 1.69 seconds here, 40-yard dash is sub 5 seconds as well, sub 4.9 to put it at that. It's 4.87 here. He had a good broad jump as well at 9.3, 28 reps on the bench press here. This is someone that he's probably going to find himself middle of the first round, something like that, maybe late at best, but a guy that if you maybe had a question or two as to like what you're getting out of someone who's, I don't want to call him undersized at the defensive tackle position, but just a little bit shorter, I guess I would feel like. When I think of big D tackles in the middle there, I'm thinking of guys that are probably closer to like 6'2", 6'3", 300 and some odd pounds, maybe a little bit more. And obviously defensive schemes can call for maybe some more slight defensive tackles depending on what you're doing here. But I would have expected him to maybe be just a tad bit taller, but 6'1.5", by no means a short man, but by no means a taller than your average type of guy. But overall, this is a first round talent that I think with the way he showed, and a lot of it came from testing numbers aside, what he did during the drills that I think really impressed a lot of people, and his stock should be going up as well. But those are the 5 guys that I looked at that I thought, wow, these guys are really jumping off the screen for me, that I think are really upping the ante for themselves coming into the NFL draft. As I said earlier, I invite you all to do the same. Let me know in the comments section down below. Who do you think stepped up and had themselves an excellent combine? Who do you think maybe walked away from the combine a little bit hurt as well? I didn't focus on the bad, but if you guys have some names to drop, I would love to hear what you have to say. That's it for me. As always, if you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.